So we got another video here, just a little bit more about some different ways that we can represent some relations together. Here we can see that we kind of have a table or kind of like a bar graph, you can say, and we're going to represent it as a table, and then we're going to represent it as a arrow diagram. What we're going to basically be doing a little bit later on is kind of going back to figuring out what does it mean to be on this horizontal axis and what does it mean to be on this vertical axis. And we're going to kind of come to conclusion later on in this unit that everything that appears on this horizontal axis, so it would be the breed of dog, this would be our independent variable, but for our purposes right now, this is going to be our first set that's going to be associated with our second set. And it really kind of goes that we're going to have our first set and it's going to be associated with our second set. And later on, this is going to become our independent variable, and that's our dependent variable. And that kind of already makes sense when we're looking at this. However, just kind of an FYI for us. So let's go ahead and let's represent this as a table. So when we are doing tables, and this will, again, kind of be something that we do later on as well, we're going to go ahead, and I just like doing a very simple like T-table or a T-chart. I like having my first set on here. That's going to be like our X's, or independent variables are going to be here. So I'm going to say this is our breed. And on the other side, I'm going to have our second set, or our dependent variable, and I'm just going to have our height. I don't really need to name any variables right now. We're not making an equation or anything like that. There's no variables given. If I really wanted to, I suppose I could say this is like little b, capital H, doesn't really matter. Right now, just breed and height. For the sake of just this video and not writing out tons of stuff, I'm just going to kind of abbreviate a couple things for myself. Feel free to do that if you'd like to, just whatever makes your life easier, that's okay. So I'm going to say Afghan Hound, so AH, Chihuahua, C, Corgi, COR, Golden Retriever, GR, German Shepherd, GS, and then a Malamute will be M. So I'm just going to kind of abbreviate that. So I haven't really even looked at my mean heights yet. I'm just really looking at my first set because that's going to be what I'm going to list in my table. Technically, you're supposed to be going kind of from least to greatest here. However, that's not really indicated in our table. I'm not going to go from the least height to the biggest height because, again, I'm not really looking at the heights right now. So I'm just going to kind of go in order as if this was a number line. So I am going to kind of start with my Afghan Hound. I'm going to go to the Chihuahua. I'm going to go to the Corgi, the cute Corgi. I'm going to go to the Golden Retriever. Looks like German Shepherd's next, and then the Malamute. So there's not really like, this is not in alphabetical order. This isn't in any sort of thing. Oh, you know what? Is this in alphabetical order? I think it might be. However, that's just kind of by coincidence. That doesn't really make any difference. I'm just actually just listing them out as I kind of see them, as if they were numbers from least to greatest, essentially reading it like a book from left to right. Now, what we have to do is match up our heights, or our second sets that's associated with our breeds, right? Because our arrow goes from first to second. So we have to say that our breed of dog is associated with the mean height. So everything on this column has to match up with what's in this first column. So we got to be able to read our bar graph. So it looks like the scale on this bar graph is going up by, each kind of box is going up by 10. You can see like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So that's how we're going to read it. Afghan Hound looks like it's in between 70 and 80, which means that's at 75. So I'm going to go ahead and go 75. I am going to just kind of put up here in centimeters so that I don't have to keep on writing centimeters down as I go. If I didn't put this, then I would have to put centimeters, but I'm kind of listing it up at my table, so I'm good to go with that. My Chihuahua is at 20, my Corgi is at 30, the Golden Retriever looks like it's at 60, and that's also the same as the German Shepherd. And finally, we have our Malamute at between 60 and 70, so 65. And there we go. We got our table kind of going. Simple T-chart, just linking our first to our second. And that's it. Arrow diagram. Let's go ahead and let's do that one. So arrow diagram is very, very similar to our table. It's almost a complete match to the table, except maybe this time we'll have multiple entries in terms of, or multiple arrows going to a singular entry. Let's see what that will look like. So for A, we got this guy. I'm just going to kind of scroll it down a little bit just to give myself a little bit more room. B, arrow diagram, don't think that you have to put it into a big kind of an oval like this. It is helpful later on, and I'll tell you why it's helpful later on. Kind of helpful later on in grade 12 applied when we start talking about set notation and stuff like that. However, for right now, I'm not really too strict on like how you represent your arrow diagram. Hey, make sure there's arrows. Let's call it like that. I'm gonna have my breed over here. I'm gonna have my height over here, and that's of course going to be in centimeters. And I'm just going to list out my breeds. Now, in this case, I wouldn't repeat any entries. There wouldn't be any reason for me to repeat any entries just by alone from the data. But if I did have any repeated breed entries, I would never repeat them in an arrow diagram, just because I would just instead have multiple arrows coming out of it instead. We'll see that with the height here. So with my height, I'll have, again, you don't have to list it in order, so that's fine. So I'm just going to have 75, 30. I'm just kind of looking up as I go. 20, 30, 60. Now, technically, I should have another entry of 60, but I'm not going to repeat it. I'm just going to kind of leave it as this. And now we just draw our arrows. So Afghan Hound goes to 75. Corgi goes to 20. Or sorry, Chihuahua goes to 20. Corgi goes to 30. Golden Retriever goes to 60, and this is what I was talking about. German Shepherd would go to 60. I would never have a double entry of 60. I would just have 2 arrows going towards it. And then a Malamute would be 65. So pretty easy, just relating it. Again, don't feel the need that you would have to put like the words in here is associated with or has the height of or whatever. It's really doesn't really matter in terms of what you're going to put in here. We already know what the association is. That's given to us in the question. So I'm not going to be picky about you actually saying you have to link something in here. That doesn't really matter to me. Don't worry about that. I do, however, want you to label out what your 2 sets are. So all these elements are all breeds, all these elements are heights, and that should be the end of that question. So just a little bit more about how you can represent sets and just kind of getting into that frame of mathematical thinking. And that would be this video done.